Hello, thanks for being in a new video. This time I have a review of the Galaxy Watch Ultra. Let's get started. This is supposedly Samsung's most advanced watch. Although I'll be honest, from my point of view, it does not deserve to be called Ultra since I do not find so many differential sections with respect to the basic models. But let's go little by little. For now, let me tell you the price, which in Mexico is 9,999 pesos, in this single edition. This model does not have different sizes or anything like that. It's the model and that's it. So, what do you think if you join me to meet it to see what we can find and possibly suggest some improvements? In design, it is something quite curious because although it is a round screen, the body of the watch ends up being a little more square, but with very rounded corners. Personally, I would have liked it better if the screen took the same shape as the body of this watch, but Samsung has continued to bet on this round screen, which I would have perhaps accepted more willingly if they had kept the rotating frame, but it has no rotating frame, so for me it is still better the Galaxy Watch 6 Classic. This screen comes protected with sapphire glass as we see on other Samsung watches, so it's not a benefit unique to this Ultra model. Samsung doesn't officially communicate what material the back is made of, but honestly it's comfortable, it doesn't feel strange at all. And on this back we can also see this new quick release button for the straps, which really helps a lot. Taking it off is very easy, putting it on maybe gets a little bit more complicated, but just apply a little bit more pressure until you hear the click and you're done. On the back we also have the new bioactive sensor, which we will talk about a little later, along with the temperature sensor. However, this new bioactive sensor is not exclusive to the Galaxy Watch Ultra because it is also found in the Galaxy Watch 7. What is exclusive to this Ultra model is the new button in the center, which Samsung has decided to name as Quick Button. But before I tell you about it, let me tell you about the rest of the buttons we found. Since the top button is the home button, meaning that if you are in any area of the watch and you press this button once, you will return to the home screen. If you press this button twice, we return to the last application we had open, so it can also be a convenient shortcut. Although note that we can in the settings adjust what we want to happen when we double click this button. If we want to access some accessibility shortcuts, to the complete list of exercises, to the water lock, or even to open any application that we want to have a very fast shortcut. If we press this button 5 times, we can activate an emergency call, which can also be something useful. And if we press and hold this button, we call the voice assistant. So let's take an example. Set a timer for 3 minutes. And the truth is that it works very well, and it's one of the features that I tend to use the most, although again it's not something that's unique to the Galaxy Watch Ultra. The bottom button is the back button, so as the name suggests, it can be used to navigate within applications or within the system, although you can do the same by swiping from the left side to the center. Although this gesture at times could become inadequately responsive, and in that case you could take advantage of the button. And by the way, I forgot to mention that in addition to Bixby with the home button, you can call Google Assistant if you wanted to, which I guess at some point is going to be updated with Gemini. And finally, the quick button is going to serve us by default to open Samsung Health. And as you notice, once you start your workout, you can press this button to pause or resume your workout. And if you press and hold the button, you can also end the workout for good. However, again, in the settings we can access to configure what action we want this button to perform. By default, there is Samsung Health, but we could also access the stopwatch, where we will also find a different operation when we enter this function. For example, with one tap we start the stopwatch, or we can also pause it. With 2 touches we will be able to mark a lap, and with a sustained touch we can restart the stopwatch. So we could also use it, for example, to turn on the flashlight, which is what I usually have by default, because I personally find it quite useful. So watch how I can with one touch turn on this flashlight. In fact, if I double tap this button, I can also change the mode, as they all count, so I can have an emergency mode style with this flashing, but with a single tap I can turn it back off. You can also map the aqua lock or turn this button off completely. Honestly, it takes some getting used to because being in the center, you'd think it's the button to access the home screen. So it was quite confusing to me on many occasions, but after a while you end up getting used to it. By the way, if you hold down this quick button for 5 seconds, you're going to enable the siren, which is one of the features that we don't find on other Samsung watches, but only on this Ultra model. It starts a countdown with a low volume siren, but after this countdown, it's going to activate the siren with tremendous intensity that really someone has to hear that you need help when you turn this on. Although maybe it would be nice if it would activate the loud sound immediately and you don't have to wait for that countdown and you as the user choose whether or not you want the countdown, but it just works as I showed you. The thickness of this watch is 12.1 millimeters. It's not characterized as being ultra thin or anything like that, and it weighs 60.5 grams. And even though it looks like a big or clunky watch, I actually think it's not uncomfortable at all. I've been using it and I didn't feel any weird fatigue. Remember also that this watch comes made with titanium for its case and also the frame in order to give it a good level of resistance. So this will be another hallmark of this Ultra model. So far, one thing that distinguishes the Ultra model is the titanium, the quick button, and the siren. And even though it doesn't integrate a rotating bezel, it's worth remembering that Samsung offers a touch bezel, so you can simply rotate on the contour of this watch, and you're going to be able to navigate all the elements of the interface. Although honestly there is nothing like having the physical bezel as found on the Galaxy Watch 6 Classic, and I find it a waste that even though this watch has kept its round screen, they have not placed the rotating bezel. The included band is made of silicone, although you know that you can also purchase other fabric models and more options available in the Samsung store. But another thing that distinguishes this watch will be its high level of resistance, although in this case it goes to the extreme for sports situations a little more outdoors. For example, it supports water resistance. This means that you could even go swimming or diving and the watch will not be damaged. This is in addition to the IP of 68 that all watches usually have, so it will stand up to water very well. And speaking of that, in the quick settings panel we are also going to find the water mode, which when activated the screen will stop responding to avoid unwanted touches when it comes in contact with water. And to deactivate it, just press and hold the button, and note that after it is deactivated, the speakers will emit a loud sound to try to expel the water that has been stored there. This watch has also passed the military test 1000 STD 810H, so it can withstand very extreme climates. For example, in this case, it withstands up to 55 degrees Celsius or 9,000 meters of altitude. So, I insist that we are going to find a very high level of resistance, but I consider that a good number of people do not need this level of resistance, but it is something much more focused on extreme sportsmen. Finally, as you can see, this is the orange option, but it is also available in dark gray, green and white. Personally, I didn't like this option too much. Let me tell you about the screen. We are in front of an OLED panel as it should be, but its size is 1.5 inches, so it really is a small screen, considering we are talking about an Ultra model. I would have liked a much larger screen. Its resolution is 480 pixels in diameter, reaching a density of 320 pixels per inch. This means that the contents will look sharp, even small letters will be legible without any problem. It is a good quality screen, but not good enough for an Ultra model. On the plus side, it has a peak brightness of 3000 nits, so even in bright sunlight you will be able to view content very clearly. That is something in which it can stand out from the rest of its family. However, it is still not an LTPO screen. I've been criticizing the same thing about Samsung watches for several generations now, and they still haven't improved this aspect. I was hoping that at least in this Ultra model we could find this screen technology, but it is still not present. The LTPO screen would allow you to save a lot of energy because when displaying static content it would only be updated with a hertz, while this screen is constantly at 60 hertz, which consumes quite a lot of battery. So, although the always-on mode is integrated in a very nice way because it keeps the same design of your cover and simply puts some elements in a different format, I'm not really going to recommend that you use always-on display because it consumes too much energy. We will talk a little later about the battery, but even though it has always-on, it is not recommended due to the screen technology that is not so advanced. It needs to be emphasized a lot because Samsung has the ability to put a much more advanced screen. but has not done so, so I will continue to criticize this. And in the case of this cover specifically, we will also find a night mode that will turn the screen into a reddish hue. This is thanks to the light sensor that it has to set the automatic brightness, so let me see if I can trick it into showing us the screen in red, but I didn't succeed. It's not only going to be enabled at night, but also when you're in a very dark place, and it's really quite a comfortable experience because that red color doesn't get to hurt your eyesight. And of course, the watch also supports the gesture of turning your wrist to turn on the screen. So I insist, the screen is not that it's bad, but it's not worthy of a watch that's going to be called Ultra. Regarding the sound, note that on the left side we will find both speaker and microphone. So in that sense it does not disappoint, but it does pretty much the same as its siblings. Notice that we will find the music player because yes, we can save music locally to play it directly on the speaker of this watch, or you could also connect your Galaxy Buds to listen directly wirelessly without the need for your cell phone. In fact, something I really like about Samsung watches is that you could even install Amazon Music, Spotify, YouTube Music, Deezer, and other applications to have music directly on your watch without the need for the cell phone. But we can also access the music control from our cell phone, so you perfectly have all the controls from this watch. Obviously, you could control the volume with this simulation of the rotating frame, which helps quite a bit for quick control. In the sound section, the new thing about this Ultra model would be the siren that I already showed you a moment ago. Among the good things that remains is the microphone that serves to answer calls directly from the watch. In fact, in this case, it also supports an eSIM. So you could set your cell phone number in this eSIM so you can forget about your physical cell phone, and if you receive a call, you can receive it directly on the watch. On the other hand, you also have the voice assistant that I showed you also a moment ago, which could be Bixby or Google Assistant. But even with Bixby, you could configure that simply by lifting the watch. You can talk to it and say the command you want. However, that consumes too much battery, so in practice you will not use it that way. Remember that with the voice assistant you can ask for timers, reminders, to add something to the calendar, or even to control things in smart things like turning on the light in your house or turning on the air conditioning. So it really is an assistant that is really going to help you control a lot of things. However, Bixby is not so good at requesting information. If your priority is to ask for the information, I would recommend more that you switch to Google Assistant. And finally, in this section, I must tell you that the vibration engine that includes this watch is very good. It is the strongest that Samsung has put to date, and yes, it is very much noticeable. So when you have it on your wrist, you immediately feel this little bump towards you to give you the indication of some notification. It's not a simple vibration that you even get to hear like cheap cell phones, but in this case you don't hear it so much, you feel it. So it's on the X-axis and it has a lot of quality. I really like this section and it is worthy of an Ultra model. Let's go now to show you everything that has to do with health monitoring, and for that we open Samsung Health. To begin with, let me show you the basics that other watches also monitor, such as daily activity, step count, activity time, approximate calories you are burning, and you can appreciate everything in a very detailed way since the software is perfectly well adapted. It shows you different graphs, different colors, and more so that you can see everything in a very simple way. We are also going to find in this part the heart rate reader that is enabled at all times. In this case, it gives you the current pulse and also gives you the range in which you have behaved, so you can also have a reference of what is the range at rest so that you more or less see if something is wrong. Honestly, it is one of the most useful tools because in addition, in the settings part, you can enable whether or not you want it to give you a notification when your heart rate is too high or too low. You can set what the threshold is, and you can also set how continuous you want this heart rate measurement to be. Obviously, it's also going to be able to monitor your sleep in a very advanced way. It's going to tell you the total duration of your sleep, the actual time. It's going to give you a score as well, so you can easily know how well you slept. It shows you a very good graph, so you can see the time of light sleep, REM sleep time, the time you are awake, and the time of deep sleep. And something new is that it also shows you a small graph of how you are moving during your sleep. Plus it shows the time of each of these stages and even more information like the time your blood oxygenation was less than 90%, which can be a problem. It also shows you your skin temperature at the time of sleep and your average heart rate, as well as your respiratory rate. So sleep monitoring is super advanced on this watch. In fact, in conjunction with your cell phone, you could monitor if you snore. It's going to be able to record all that snoring and you can listen to it later. It will also detect the naps that you take during the day, and it also has a sleep assistant that will give you some tips and these kinds of little details. It can even give you badges and awards as you improve your sleeping habits. The watch is also able to detect sleep apnea, which is when you stop breathing at night. So it can somehow help you detect this condition. However, this is only available for the United States and is not yet available for other countries. It will also be able to measure your blood oxygen by showing you an average range in which you behave. Although you could also measure it manually at certain times, it will also be able to monitor your stress, and note that it also shows you a graph of how your stress has behaved throughout the day. And here it also has breathing exercises to relax you. As you know, through your cell phone in the Samsung Health app, you can see all these detailed reports. So it's important that you not only use Galaxy Wearable, which is to link and configure some parameters of this watch, but also use Samsung Health, which is to see everything that this watch is collecting from your data. And for women, something very important will be the menstrual cycle section, because through the temperature sensor we'll be taking samples of your skin temperature, and based on an important study, it will be able to predict the behavior of your cycle. So we are not talking about a simple control of the menstrual cycle as other watches can offer, where they simply record the days and symptoms, and only based on that will try to make predictions. But in this case, through the monitoring of skin temperature will be a much more accurate prediction. And among other things that this watch can do, we are going to find this application where we are going to be able to access the blood pressure monitor and electrocardiogram. However, the blood pressure monitor requires calibration, so you need to have a device to measure the pressure. I already recorded this process with another model, but it is still the same with this new Watch Ultra. So while you have the watch on, you set up the measurements that this device gives you, and once it is calibrated, you can measure your blood pressure without the need for that device. However, you need to recalibrate the watch from time to time. So I personally have found it very strange, because almost every time I need to measure my pressure, the watch is no longer calibrated, so I end up without the ability to measure my pressure. But if you're someone who measures pressure more consistently, you're likely to notice when you already need to be recalibrated more quickly, unlike what happened to me. Obviously, it's a reference data, it's not a medical device, so it's only meant to try to help and keep track, but it's pretty cool that you can measure your pressure directly on your wrist without any additional products. In the same way, this watch is capable of doing electrocardiograms, as I have shown in other models as well, so it is exactly the same process. Remember that these buttons are not only buttons, but they are also electrodes, so by placing your fingers on them, we are going to be able to perform this electrocardiogram that we can later share with our doctor. So it definitely has very good capabilities, but it's not something that's unique to the Ultra model. Now let's talk a little bit about the new bioactive sensor, which is going to allow us to have even more advanced monitoring. Remember, we have other electrodes here as well, so it's got super advanced monitoring. For several generations now, Samsung has had this body composition meter where you set your height and weight, and after that we're going to be able to put 2 fingers on these electrodes and it's going to do all the scanning of your body. Ideally it's quiet, so I'll be back in a moment. And as you realize, in this case, it's going to show you how much muscle mass you have, how much fat mass, and how much body water. This is data that you usually get on some advanced scales where you hold some electrodes. So being able to do this analysis from your watch is a very good thing, although this is a feature that's retained by many Samsung watches from past generations. And interestingly, so far I haven't seen another manufacturer, at least of those that make smartphones, launch a watch with these same capabilities. So far only Samsung can do it. But thanks to the new bioactive sensor, we're also going to have access to a new index called the Age Index. This age index has a lot to do with your diet and your physical activity as to analyze your metabolism. So obviously it's not going to vary that much from day to day, but if you wear the device for a long enough time, you might be able to see more or less how it's varying. And obviously to improve this, you have to exercise and eat healthy, but it is a very important index that no other manufacturer offers so far. And this is possible thanks to the new bioactive sensor that emits a yellow light. In fact, it explains here that this index is going to measure the compounds that develop naturally in your body when protein and fat molecules are oxidized by sugar molecules. So as you realize, it also has to do with glucose, although it's not specifically a blood glucose index, but it can help you see more or less how your metabolism is behaving. So you see, in this case, I need to exercise probably. And another new feature that also comes in conjunction with the artificial intelligence analytics is the energy score. That's why Samsung classifies it under Galaxy AI. This is the energy score that the watch gives you based also on your physical activity, your rest, and other things. In fact, watch how it's going to give us in a detailed way how we sleep, the regularity of the schedule to sleep, the time we were sleeping, the activity of the previous day, the heart rate during sleep, and the heart rate variability. So as you realize, in my case, it marks me that I need attention on the previous day's activity since I didn't do any exercise yesterday. So in a way, it can tell you how much energy you have in the day. That also helps you, for example, if you are overdoing your exercise time, because it will tell you that you need to rest. So it depends a lot on your lifestyle habits. Regarding the workouts, note that it has a very large list of supported sports, but in this case there is also one that is multi-sport, which notes that it would help you, for example, in a triathlon, duathlon, aquathlon, or many others, and you can even create your own routine. So if you usually do a variety of exercises, you can establish what the first step is if you want to have a warm-up, if you want to have a cool-down, and if you want to include breaks. So it can be very useful for you as a user, specifically on the clock, to detail what exercise routine you want to follow, and you can create different routines for different days. When you enter a workout, start a countdown, and please note that we will find various detailed information. Depending on the type of exercise, it may show you more or less information, but this is the most basic information it shows you. From here it can show you more information, and note also that we have available access to the player directly from this same exercise application, or we can control to pause or go to a new exercise. But the interesting thing is that you can also leave running in the background that application while you go out to answer some WhatsApp message or anything else. Then you can come back and continue exercising. This watch also offers dual band GPS, so you can have accurate tracking of routes when you go out for outdoor exercise. Obviously, through this watch you can also access a compass that can give you more precise coordinates if you enable your location. It is also capable of measuring altitude for some exercises that have to do with this parameter, and also offers a control for medications, but again only for the United States. The truth is that I would like to see these types of tools launched with greater speed in other countries, although it is understood that they must take a process of regulation from different government entities. Although the medication reminder function, I don't think it should pass so many regulations, but it is not available outside the United States. And finally, with respect to what has to do with health issues within the security and emergency settings, Samsung offers hard fall detection, although it comes turned off by default. But note that you can turn it on, and we're going to find some settings to require you to swipe the screen before making the emergency call if you want to, otherwise it's automatically going to make the emergency call. Also, how long you want the countdown to be, so that in case it has detected a hard fall but you're okay, you can cancel the emergency call. And finally, note that it also plays an alert sound both on the watch and on the phone, and you can configure when to detect falls, as by default it is set to only while you are doing some training. And finally, share your emergency information with other security contacts. What it doesn't include is noise detection, which for example the Apple Watch does, so that's still pending on this watch. However, I think that so far it is one of the most advanced watches in terms of the number of elements it is able to monitor, but in that sense it is exactly the same as the Galaxy Watch 7. The battery of this watch is from the Galaxy Watch 7. The battery of this watch is 590 mAh. This translates to a very low battery life if you have always on display, as I anticipated. In fact, I was using it with always on display and I practically had to charge it every day. That is, the duration was 1 day or maybe a day and a half maximum, depending on the use. So definitely, to be called Ultra, it's a watch that doesn't deliver on anything that has to do with battery life. Without always on display, I managed to extend this duration to about 3 days, so I think it works much better when you have always on display activated. The important thing here is that through the routines you can create on your Galaxy devices, you could automate turning always on display on or off. For example, I just set up that when I'm in the house, always on display is not active, and when I leave the house, automatically, without me having to change the setting manually, it's going to turn on. So that kind of complements the experience a little bit, but the battery specifically is not good. With the battery saver mode, it could give you about 4 days of battery life, but obviously it's going to turn off a lot of monitoring and a lot of tools, so it's not recommended. So interestingly enough, despite using a 3 nanometer processor, there doesn't seem to be anything very good about the battery. I would insist that a lot of this is due to the display technology. I think if Samsung were to put in an LTPO screen, the battery could last a lot longer when you have always on active. And as for charging speed, I really wish I could give you good news, but I don't. In my test with 15 minutes of charging, it barely recovered 13% of the battery. In 30 minutes, it got to 28%, and the full charge it finished in 2 hours and 2 minutes. So it's a watch that you're definitely going to have to charge every day, even though the watch doesn't fully discharge every day. I'm telling you this because it's better to charge it for 15 minutes or 30 minutes 1 moment a day than to have to wait 2 hours to get the whole battery back. So in this aspect, this is definitely where it has disappointed the most, considering that this is supposedly an ultra version where one expects a much better battery life than the rest of the watches. And in fact, due to the incorporation of this new bioactive sensor, we are going to notice that it takes up more space inside, and therefore wireless charging becomes much more complicated. So, if you wanted to charge your watch on the back of your cell phone, you should know that in this case it is not possible. At times it comes to detect charging, but then says that the charger is not compatible and many more things. So just like the Galaxy Watch 7, it doesn't get to take advantage of the wireless power share feature found on high-end Galaxy devices. So definitely that everything to do with charging and battery on this watch I didn't like. But let's talk a little bit about the software. Remember that it has a lot of dials available, and several of these dials are also going to have some internal customization. For example, you could change the style on this watch. There are also other dials where you can change the background color or the color of the hands. Note that in this case it also supports different color combinations. So the level of customization of the dials is really very good. For example, in this case, we could also customize the hands. Also, in this case, we have the night mode, which, as you realize, you can activate manually or automatically. And we find also access to complications. I mean, we can display different information throughout the watch, and there are many options available. So in this case, it's really a very good experience that we have in Samsung because of the amount of elements that we can put on our information dial. The truth is that in this sense it does come to surprise, and it definitely can be one of its strongest points because it offers a lot of information on this screen. And in addition to the predefined covers, which are always the best designed, you can access Google Play to download more covers, or you can even install an alternative store like Phaser to access more covers. So in that sense it has everything we could ask for. And yes, as I mentioned, we will find Google Play available to download more apps. So not only will there be additional covers to download, but you can access more apps like to track flights, to customize your workouts differently. Anyway, there are many apps available. Among them, WhatsApp is also available, which will be one of the main ones obviously. The navigation of the watch is very basic. Sliding from top to bottom, you access the quick settings list just as it happens on the cell phone. Sliding from left to right, we access the notifications, where, by the way, we can also respond directly. And note that in this case, if you have a Galaxy Z Fold 6 or a Galaxy Z Flip 6, it can generate responses to you with generative artificial intelligence. So now there are not only predefined responses, but also responses that do have to do with the context of what's going on in your conversation. You also have emojis to answer, or you can directly access the keyboard, where you could also slide to type as long as you activate it in the settings, or you can also change the keyboard style for voice dictation or for typing and drawing the letters specifically. So it's definitely a considerably good keyboard that we have available over here. Also, the notifications are well grouped. In case you get a lot of notifications, everything is grouped together nicely. It can even show you images through the notifications. So if you were sent an image and you have the automatic download, it can be shown. Or if you were sent a sticker, or if they rang the doorbell, for example, in compatible apps, it can show you directly on the watch the image. So I think the notification management is one of the best we're going to find on this watch. And if we slide from right to left, we will be able to access the widgets, which, by the way, we can rearrange and customize completely to our liking, so we can place the one we want. There is also an excellent variety of widgets. Even if you have WhatsApp, WhatsApp will also appear as an available widget. So in this sense also, we will find very good tools to customize our watch. We will also have Google Maps available to navigate, whether it's walking or while you're in the car or something like that. You should also know that Samsung modes and routines are synchronized with your cell phone. So notice that we could enable sleep mode, and it's also going to change things on our cell phone, or movie mode as well. It all depends on how we set things up. And just like I mentioned to you a moment ago, if you have a Galaxy with modes and routines, also in the routines we're going to be able to add now, among the consequences, something that modifies the behavior of our Galaxy Watch. So we could change the face, enable or disable always on display, set the disconnect alert, power saving mode, sound mode, and other things, so that based on your location or any other condition, your watch will change its settings. So in this sense, it is spectacular. Remember that we will also find Google Wallet to be able to add our cards and pay directly with the watch, although for that you have to enable an on-screen lock mode. If you have a high-end Galaxy, we will also be able to access the camera directly from the watch. Notice that you can press this button and it will start the countdown, so you can take a picture including the preview, or you could also switch to video mode. So it's actually very good behavior, because even if you slide like the virtual rotating ring, you can control the zoom. So you can even change the framing directly from the watch. And obviously we'll find all the other features that come on other watches, like access to the timer, stopwatch, alarm, and all these tools that we can completely configure to our liking. You should know that the alarm is also synchronized with your Galaxy phone, or you can set alarms directly only on the watch. So the synchronization is very good. We also have access to the weather forecast, access to the calendar where we also have a month view, and we can also access reminders directly from this watch. In fact, you can add reminders simply with the voice assistant. And the funny thing is that we will also find the gallery from which we can also synchronize some of our photos, or also sometimes some images are included by default. Remember that there is also access to SmartThings for you to control from your wrist all the devices in your home. If you have some smart lights, locks, air conditioning and other, you can control everything from this device. This watch also includes the app to control your Galaxy Buds, so you can manage the sound and noise cancellation mode, among other things. And we are even going to find the internet browser, so we can enter the page we want directly from the watch. We can even enter YouTube or TikTok to watch videos, although obviously the experience on such a small screen can become complex. But it is interesting that we can access any web page to consult information from this watch. And there are more applications that you can install, such as Google Keep, the voice assistant and others. But we must also highlight the voice recorder, which is synchronized with your Galaxy device. So if you have one of the latest generation, you could even record and transcribe the recording to generate a summary with artificial intelligence. And obviously the recordings are made directly from the watch. Notice that immediately we're going to give it permission to transfer to the phone. So on the cell phone we must enable this type of permissions that we were missing. And finally, notice that in the buttons and gestures section, we are also going to find this gesture, so that by pressing twice your fingers together, you can activate some tools. Notice, for example, how we could control our music by making this gesture to pause or resume playback. Every time the clock supports this gesture, a nice animation will appear. For example, I set a timer and notice that to stop the timer or stop the alarm, for example, this option will appear and there is the animation that I can trigger that action by doing this gesture. So it can become very useful. Even for the camera shutter, we could also do this gesture to be able to take the picture. We could also shake the watch in this way to be able to reject some calls, alerts, timers, or reminders. And finally, there is also the talk gesture, which is also compatible with some other things. In this case, you can program this gesture to be able to open some tool. It can be activating the flashlight or opening any other application. Note that in this case, it is enabled in a simple way, so it can become useful as well. However, it can consume you more battery than we would like, and we already know that the battery in this device is scarce. Finally, remember that in the calculator we not only find basic operations, but we will also find a unit converter and a tip calculator for you to choose how much was the amount, how much percentage you want to give, and if there are several people, so that between all can contribute for this tip. So it's a curious tool that's not available on all watches. And obviously, a function that you will use very constantly will be the tool to ring your cell phone when you can't find it, or at least I use it all day. For the moment, this has been all regarding this Galaxy Watch Ultra. Let me know in the comments your opinion and what you would like Samsung to improve for the next generation. I hope that in the next generation they really give us a LTPO screen, bigger screen, more battery, which are the kind of little things you would expect from a watch that carries the Ultra name. For now, this has been all. I hope you liked it. If you did, you know you can tell me, and I'll see you next time.